something more powerful than you, making your thing happen, really going for it, doing business on your terms, giving it your all, making a difference.
What is up, everybody? It feels great to be back. Uh, took 2 weeks off because I had to go to both the Battle Hard in Atlanta and then go to Nationals. So, um, had an amazing time at both. I was able to squeak in to top eight at fifth for the PTI event, and then I was able to go a 10-4 at Nats. I went 7-1 in Classic Constructed, and went 3-3 in Draft, which is kind of to be expected. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on Monarch Draft, so I take responsibility for that. Kind of dropping the ball, but lessons learned. On a good note, before the event, I was 50, I think 53rd. Um, for classic or for constructed elo, and going 7-1 in classic constructed in Nats should be enough. I would hope to bump me up for a world championship invitation via elo. So that's super exciting to be able to. I want to say secure it, but like I don't want to say it and then it not happen. That'd be kind of like be kind of scuffed, right? Um, so the topic for today, we're going over how to beat the fatigue Briar deck. And uh, a common response that I got was kind of like, why the hell would you make a video on how to beat a deck that's only going to be around for 3 weeks? Well, let me explain my thought process. As I was leaving the Nats venue on Saturday evening, kind of stopping and saying hey to people and stuff like that. As I was walking out, I was stopping and talking to people. I heard it took about 3 minutes to actually leave the venue because I stopped and talked to a couple of people, waved, stuff like that. Over the 3 minutes it took me to actually leave, as I was walking out, I heard either 4 or 5 different people, complain about playing against the deck. They said it wasn't fun. They said that things along the line of they didn't understand it and things like that. So, whereas I will never have to play against it, or most people I don't even want to say most people in the U.S. because in the U.S. we have Battle Hardened Columbus, we have Battle Hardened Portland, and then over in Italy we have Battle Hardened Florence, if I'm not mistaken, and then we also have all the Nats that are happening across the next 3 weeks. And I didn't want to just leave those people hanging, right? And so just, happy to help those people out, help solve that problem for them, and kind of provide any support/value that I possibly can to those people, and not just be worried about my schedule and stuff like that. Um, Other than that, I'm just going to talk for like 5-10 minutes while we get people in here, and then we'll start. We're going to go deep into uh, the deck, what it does, what it doesn't do. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know, guaranteed, or your money that you didn't pay back. But on a side note, I had 66 people. I counted every single one of them. I had 66 people over the weekend walk up to me and said something along the lines of, thank you for doing the streams, thank you for the content, whatever, something along those lines. And I just wanted to say that I counted each and every one of them. It means that much to me. I really do appreciate it, getting all the feedback and everything along those lines. So I really do appreciate all of you. And for the 3 people that saw me and didn't say anything, you could have made it 69, but you squandered the opportunity. But on a serious note, thank you so much. If you came up and said something, I'm always in your debt. Well, becoming the Canadian Nats. Well, I'm not Canadian, so definitely not. Definitely not. You think Charles Dunn is done making fatigue decks? I doubt it. I doubt it. He's got a knack for it, right? I think he has a knack for it. Is there a calling? Is there a calling in Canadian Nats? Is that why you're asking? Sorry you didn't end up doing well in draft as you would like. Yep. They were super helpful. They were super helpful. In fact, the games that we played on Wednesday encompassed approximately 30% of my Monarch testing. So, like I said, it wasn't. There's nobody to blame but me. Simple as that. I was panicking for a solution for Briar into Lexi, and so I did what I could. As far as matchups go, across my 8 classic constructed matches, I played against 4 Lexis, which one of my one only loss in classic constructed was to Evan Herndon, which was the person who got second place. Congrats to Evan, amazing guy, even better player, and don't mind losing games to players of that caliber ever. Played 4 Lexis, 2 Briar, 1 Bravo, 1 Dash were my 8 matchups for Classic Constructed. And the only game we lost to was one of the 4 Lexis. So with Lexi being what I would argue probably my worst matchup, because I brought a traditional Channel Heroic with slightly upgraded blocking potential and 3 copies of Infectious Host, that's probably like my worst matchup is Lexi. So anytime you get 4 of your worst matchups and you come out, 7-1, we'll take it, right? No qualms there. Other than that, nothing too crazy. Had an amazing time seeing everybody. Got to play a lot of poker, got to play with Roger, some teammates, Pat, all those guys. Had a lot of fun being able to just hang out with everybody. It was just a blast. Oh my God. And the food, y'all? Oh, we went to the Wynn Buffet. They rolled me out of there. I'm telling you, they rolled me out of the buffet. It was insane. LL format. I'm excited to give it a shot, when it actually becomes a serious thing. Your enjoyment of Briar got me to the final. Try her out. Yep. Bummed that she hit LL. Yep. I mean, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, the way that I look at it is I kind of got a little lucky, with her landing at 998, and getting, an extra 2 to 3 months out of her. I would say that I'm pretty lucky to be able to get that extended amount of time. So after the last CC round in Nats, it hit a little different, knowing that it was, the last one in a rated event, unless LL becomes an actual like legit format. But it hit different. I've never been upset after winning a game, but that was one of them. No calling, but a PTI event. LSS doesn't care about Canada. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. Maybe they don't put callings in Canada because Canadians just come down and win ours. Canadians don't need any more PTIs and gold foils. Maybe that's it. Ended up undefeated in draft myself. I was much happier with my draft than CC performance in the end. That's awesome. Opponent of the game versus Craig and Lucas. Yep. It happens. I'm convinced that LL format will have viable heroes past what is already LL'd. Yeah. Skeletivis. The days. Wish Canada would get a battle hardening calling. Yep. Briar got LL'd into Fortnite. Oh no, not like that. We're just gonna chat for like 5 more minutes, then we're gonna jump straight into it. I don't want to use up everybody's time too much. Just want to give everybody a chance to get in here before we actually get rolling into everything. How was everybody's tournament? Let me know everybody's results. What was their favorite part of the weekend? Maybe it's not about results. Maybe did you have an interesting game? What's the case? What event do you think they'll debut the L format? Well, that's interesting. I mean, they basically have to start it as a side event thing, if I'm not mistaken, right? Don't they just like have to be like, look, you can do this on the side, and then like if it has a large attendance, then they could actually like leverage it into something. But I don't see anything higher than a PTI or battle hardened event, anything higher than those for a LL format. I just think it'd be kind of wild. But I mean, maybe that's what they're going for, right? Like maybe they do like a calling every now and again, and it's LL format, and it's just like they just check and they do it once a year and kind of see what everybody all the stupid stuff people can come up with. I mean, maybe that's good enough on the entertainment front, to like acquire players and things like that. That it's a positive EV play. That'd be interesting. Finished 48th, but losing the last 2 rounds to knock me out of top 32. Yeah, I landed just out of top 32 as well. I feel that one. Playing Josh, and he overpowered on turn 1. Lost your husk. Yeah, I think I heard about that. Yeah, in the battle hardened. Yep, of course. Winston Nats for the goal of day 2ing. So coming close to top 8. Yeah, so in the first Nats that I went to in 2021, I landed at 20th. And the second one, 2022, I landed at 13th. And then this one I landed 40th. So it's the worst performance so far. Took Briar to all 3, of course. But, I don't think 40 is anything you could be like mad about, Like I'm still happy with it. I did better than I thought I would do in CC in a rather hostile environment for my deck list. So super happy about that. And massive congratulations to Charles Dunn and his team, Pat, Michael, all those guys that. Sorry if I don't know anybody else's name that helped work on the list, but they did a fantastic job. I put out a tweet earlier in the week that was basically just saying, that I when I when I made the Goliath Gauntlet 2 list, I had no clue that it would be so close to the final form. I think that's amazing. That sucks that I wasn't the one to push it over the line, but if I could play any role in that, I'll take it. I'll take it. I will take it. But they made huge innovations. Huge innovations. When I played my Goliath Gauntlet 2 list, it had to be a lot more offensively tailored. Hence the pummels, the cryptic crossing, and a couple cards like that. Because there are a lot more fives running around and stuff like that. You kind of in dash, there was a lot of dash as well. So you kind of had to force that interaction. You couldn't just turtle. So obviously, this meta is way more conducive for to go on the other end of that spectrum, if you will. But they did an amazing job working on. I think Pat told me something along the lines of, across like 3 or 4 players, the deck only lost like 1 or 2 games, and I think like one of them was to me. I played Pat, but I don't know if it even lost another game or who it lost against. I have no clue. But from what I hear, the list did absolutely phenomenal. But like I said at the beginning, before we got a little bit more people, the reason I'm doing this is for anybody playing in Nats in the next 3 weeks or so, or Battle Hardened, whatever the case may be, or you just want to stick it to the guy at your armory that you know he's going to bring it because he's a fatigue player and it's out there now, right? Just a little context. Like I just got done saying, I've been playing a deck that's very similar for about 7 months now. So all of this isn't just off the cuff, speculation or anything. I know how to play it. I know how to play against it. I'm just giving everybody all the information that I have and just go off of that. Are you going to mention my strategy that I shared in Discord? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Donkel. Shared in the Discord. Let me look that up. I remember you saying something about it. What did you say? Other than fatigue Briars in Fortnite, probably. What did you say? Oh, yeah. I just saw that. That's hilarious. Definitely not. Definitely not. What is your take on Arcanic Shockwave? I think it's a perfectly fine card. I think depending on how you're taking, there's only like a few 0 for 4 flex spots. But if you wanted to take off Cokes or something like that, you could and just up your block value. And plus, if you play like Lightning Press and cards like that, 1 card for 5 damage is never the worst. Never the worst. So I played Arcanic Shockwave at the PTI event that I top 8'd. I also ran like a couple red Electrifies in the sideboard to kind of support that premise. Arcanic Crackle is great too. Just Arcanic Crackle performs a lot worse with like Force of Nature and a little bit into Bravo. Anybody that's willing to actually run AB into you, it can perform a little bit worse if they have a way to utilize excess resources. So just be careful with that because you're sacrificing the arcane for the breakpoint, basically, or you're sacrificing the breakpoint for the arcane. So I think I've been wasting everybody's time long enough. I think we're gonna hop right into it. If you have any questions at all during this discussion on how to play against it, final runaway record was 32-7. That's hella good. That's hella good. That is amazing. Now, Michael, the real question is how many of those wins were due to surprise? Because Pat told me, like, I think 3 or 4 people sided into him completely wrong. And I think he stole 2 drill mile wins or something like that. Maybe even a dash or something like it. That's hilarious. But I mean, the element of surprise is like, it's valuable. It's a real thing. It's not something to be like overlooked. So like I said, if anybody has any questions about anything that I'm going over, feel free to throw it in chat. I'll get to it as soon as I see it. And we are going to go ahead and talk about how to beat this thing. Let's get straight to it. All right. Everybody knows my stance on on fatigue. One of the things I used to say was fatigue and flesh and blood. If you give me a blank canvas in 15 minutes, I'm going to paint you something nice. That's something that I said after the Indianapolis Nats, and I just thought it was hilarious. I got a little piece if you're playing Kano. I don't know if it's a new piece or not. I'm pretty sure I've seen somebody do it before for Kano Justin at the end. At the end, I have a little thing of like tech cards. Nothing like super spicy, but like just things you can utilize to help improve the matchup if you want to. I don't think it's needed, but if you wanted to. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to be going over are these topics. Okay, this is just kind of like what's in store, if you will. Okay, so the first things we have to understand the deck, right? We can't beat what we don't understand. There's a term, I don't know if anybody else calls it turn mapping, but it's basically value analysis throughout a turn to make the most impactful decisions, if you will, from a value standpoint. You have block down priority for the Briar player's hand, and you have normal damage stacking is not the answer. It's not the answer. And we're going to get into why that is. And Tunic plays such a huge role in the way the deck operates. It's massive. And we're going to talk about the deck's inability to leverage full tempo and how it's one of its weaknesses, and how recursion seems like a solid response, but it's actually extremely risky against this deck. Okay. So understanding the deck, okay? Technically, it's not a fatigue deck. If you really want to be very specific, in some matchups, the only way to win is fatigue, so therefore it defaults to that strategy in said matchup. But the deck is just trying to actively make trades and win on a basis of value, okay? That's all it is trying to do, okay? 15 to 16 value per turn when trading. Okay, that's the important part. That much value, utilizing things like 2 card for 7s, Reaping Blade, make a Rune Chant swing Reaping Blade, and then of course Tunic Crown of Seeds, and then your 4 block blues and your D-Reacts. All right. And that has built-in recursion, obviously, with Evergreen. And then the only difference between this deck and regular Briar is the deck pays a much higher opportunity cost to acquire an embodiment than a regular standard Briar deck, right? Because for a regular Briar deck, they can block their hand down to 1 card and then just 0 for 4. Whereas this deck, the only way to obtain an embodiment is to utilize 2 cards to do it, and we can leverage that to our advantage and kind of use it as a pseudo exploit, if you will. Okay, so what is turn mapping? Okay. Turn mapping is the pilot that is piloting the Briar deck, and their ability to trade relies on the ability to predict the opponent's last few threats per turn. Okay, and I gave us just a standard Lexi hand as an example. Okay, so we're gonna say that you have a Searing Shot red face up in the arsenal, and you play out the premeditate, and you pitch your blue. Obviously, you load these 2 arrows. You can pick whichever one first, whatever the case may be. Right? It's just a standard Lexi hand, nothing exciting. The way that this deck is able to win via value is by accurately predicting what is coming next. Okay, now as a Lexi player, you're already at a disadvantage because you have to literally show them face up what is typically going to be your last attack. Okay, so they are able to map your damage out in the turn. If you play your premeditate and your Searing Shot, and then you pitch the blue to load the Searing Shot, you have 1 card in hand, right? They already know the worst case scenario is a 1 for 5 arrow because that's all you can fit into that situation. So they can block down accordingly and be able to make the best decision possible. Okay, now it seems kind of obvious, but it's very important. For Lexi, it's much harder to do, but you really need to focus on denying them as much information as possible to ruin their value analysis, right? Because they might think that it's a correct window to take a tiny amount of damage to throw a 2 for 7, whereas, for example, I would never, suggest this line. I'm not saying that it's optimal, but look at it from their point, right? Let's say you held the premeditate, okay? And you throw the searing shot with go again, okay? And then you throw the infecting shot with go again, okay? So you have 1 card in hand, and you have this searing shot in arsenal, okay? Now, that could be a very deceptive, quote-unquote, line, because the plan could just be to fire the searing shot and then arsenal what theoretically should be an arrow. It could be a codex, obviously. But there are lines where you can throw a pre-med in the middle to kind of disrupt what they think is coming and what they think they can take, right? You can see it in a lot of the top 8 matches from Charles. He was able to take a lot of damage from the first attack because the Lexi players were playing out their entire hand out front. Whereas things like Icequake, you're not really getting a whole lot of value from that Frostbite. Now, I'm not saying always hold your Icequakes. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is be cognizant of the information you are giving to the opponent. When you play all your non-attacks out front and you start throwing a couple arrows, it's very easy to say, okay, I got 7 damage coming in. Let's block these 2 cards, and then we'll take this one because it's not even that bad, and throw a 2 for 7, right? They have the ability to make that value analysis. Anytime you can disrupt that, it's amazing, okay? Attack reactions are great in these situations. Lightning Press is huge against this deck because they're not actively trying to use defense reactions for that purpose. They're trying to use defense reactions for breakpoints specifically. That is the most important thing. Okay, so anytime you can add Lightning Press, Razor Reflex, Pummel, anything like that. Obviously, Pummel not so much because they are getting the breakpoint value on that, but Razor Reflex and Ancestral cards like that, super premium against this deck. Because they're just trying to cover up 4 for 4 on those D-reacts. And anytime you can force them out of the hand to get a little less value, always a positive, always a positive. Okay, so what before I mentioned a block down priority. Okay, the way that this deck operates is that they draw their hand. The first thing that they always block with is anything that is a duplicate of anything in their hand. Okay, sounds kind of obvious, and that's because it is. Okay, we're not breaking the game in this analysis. This is just how it happens, right? If he has 2 D reacts, we're blocking with one of them because we can't do anything with the other one, right? This deck doesn't operate well on duplicates of anything other than Scar for Scar, which is, there's only a few in the list. So then a decision is to be made from what we previously mentioned, mapping out the aggression on the opponent's turn. They are able to delineate whether they want to block out the rest of the cards in hand or they want to go ahead and give up the sink blow or arsenal the sink blow or play out the raging onslaught. So the reason that I'm trying to show this to you guys is you can get a lot of information based on what they block with first. Okay? If they block with an attack, okay, on the first thing that you attack them with, right? Let's assume the example of Lexi, right? You throw out a bolt and shot that has no on-hit effect, right? Because you have a card face up in Arsenal. And they block with a Raging Onslaught. That should automatically ring that they have either an attack in hand or an attack in Arsenal because they want to latch onto that attack as late down the blocking priority as possible. So that way, if you don't have a very threatening turn, they can send it and then get that embodiment and make the process that much easier on the next turn, right? So what they block with first actually gives a lot of information, and keep that in mind. As far as everything else, you have to get very good reads. It's very dependent on what they have, what they don't have, what they've blocked with already, things of that nature. So just understanding. This is my 20-second explanation for any new players, newish players, of what damage stacking is. Just real quick, 20 seconds. Damage stacking, I like to explain with a deck full of 60 head jabs, okay? All it is 60 copies of head jab. Basically, 0 cost, 3 go again attack, and that's all your deck is. You have 2 choices, right? You can either send 12 damage every single turn that represented by this orange line, okay? Or you can Arsenal 1, deal 9 damage 1 turn, and then the next turn you can play all 5 out and deal 15. That is damage stacking in a nutshell. Just a little 20-second for any new players that we have joining us today. Okay, and now we get to explain Fast and Love, yeah, for the the head jabs, yeah, the dream. But I'm gonna explain why normal damage stacking is not the answer to beating this deck. Okay. And these 2 lines right here are the most important parts of the whole discussion, right? Consistent pressure and making them pay to put a card in Arsenal is a great way to attack this deck. Now, some decks have the luxury of doing so and some plainly do not. And that's okay, because there's another avenue that you can use to attack this deck. And that is in this line right here. There is absolutely 0 difference. Okay, let's use the example of they throw a CNC at you. And you're Lexi. We'll keep using Lexi as an example because 23% of the people played it, right? You're Lexi, they throw a CNC at you. You block 2 cards. Right? You have 2 cards in hand, 1 card in Arsenal. You flip the 1 face up. Doesn't matter what it really is. Let's assume it's some random arrow. And you have a blue and a red infecting shot. And let's assume you can fire both arrows. Do you actively accomplish anything by sending that infecting shot from hand? The answer really is no, right? Because they're going to block 2 cards, and then they're going to send another 7 on their turn, assuming they have one. They could not have one. That's a fair assessment. So anytime that you want to take a step back and set up a really big turn, okay, which we saw Craig Krimpel's, wasn't that his name? The semifinals. He did a perfect example of a double rain razors, right? With 2 cards in hand, he just passed turn. That's exactly what you need to do if you are playing a deck that has any explosive capability, okay? If your deck does not have explosive capability, you need to just apply consistent pressure with breakpoints, okay? The deck does not handle it well because without any acquisition of tempo, no embodiment is made, and then you're basically just a Bravo deck with no disruption, with the exception of CNC and Warmongers, right? So if you have the ability to be explosive like Lexi, 3 of a kind, Rain Razors, things like that, it's perfectly okay to just pass with multiple cards in your deck because we all know the worst case scenario on the following turn, more than likely, unless they have a Scar that's turned on or an E-Strike, the worst case scenario is 8 damage, right? Make a Rune Chant, swing a 7. And sometimes it's literally make a Rune Chant in Reaping Blade. That happens a hell of a lot. More often than you would think. They actually do not even have an attack. And also, we need to talk about regular damage stacking and what the embodiment does, right? And what I mean right here is kind of using this line as an example. What you don't want to do, you want to either amplify this or reduce it, okay? You want to have little fluctuations to where they can't afford to keep a 2-card hand and actually acquire set embodiment. Or you want to magnify it so much that they can't utilize their full hand for tempo, and you just wait for the perfect hand and just go all in, right? But if you go somewhere in the middle where this represents, right, what they will do and where the deck actually thrives is taking a tiny bit of damage to send a 2 for 7 and getting that embodiment and getting even more value on the flip side. If you're ever curious of like how to evaluate the embodiment, on average, it's worth like 1.9 because they run probably about 28 non-attacks. And so anytime you give them an embodiment, on the next turn, they're going to be able to block, on average, almost 2 more damage, right? Which could be a lot worse if your deck heavily relies on breakpoints. It's very important, okay? So with the damage stacking, why I'm saying normal damage stacking is not the answer is you either need to reduce your valleys and reduce your peaks to make it more consistent actual damage / throughput, or you need to heavily amplify it and take like a massive off turns that literally do nothing. However, that's caveat, you have to have an explosive deck to be able to take that avenue. Okay. Embodiment management is a trap. Okay. It's okay to do it if you have the armor to support it, or you have a card like 3 of a kind where you can kind of deny it and still have a push. But if you are blocking a 7 attack, you have to think of it this way. If you block a 7 attack with 2 cards, all right, let's assume you have an arsenal. they're going to cover up all 3 of your cards, and then they're going to send another one the next turn, right? Because they block very efficiently. So you're not going to progress the game in any way if you actively try to manage the embodiment. It's a very common mistake that I see players make against this deck, is actually trying to deny the embodiment for a good reason. Now, one good case scenario is like, let's say it's the Briar mirror match, but like one's on Channel Mount Heroic. One thing I love to do is just save the armor. When I get my Channel Mount Heroic, they throw a 7 at me. I give them like 1 card and jam the armor, deny that embodiment, and then go in, right? That is perfectly acceptable. It's effective, things like that. But I will not actively go out of my way every single turn to deny the embodiment. Don't be too scared of it, but respect it. Shuffling your deck is probably the worst thing you can do. And let me explain that. This is why remembrance and cards like that, there's a strategy that we're going to get into where it is applicable and it is effective. But for most people's strategies that they're going to run into this deck, it's actually the worst thing you can do. Okay? Let's say you're 7 turns in. Okay? You're about halfway through first cycle. You've pitched, let's say, 8 blue cards, right? So the bottom of your deck, assuming you don't have like any particular pitch stack going, whether you do or don't, you have a mass of blue cards at the bottom of your deck. Okay? So your deck should be looked at as like the bottom 20% of it is just predominantly blue cards. And then the upper part has the starting ratio of your deck, right? Assume you start with 16 blues. That top portion, without you shuffling, maintains that throughput or threat density, whatever you want to say. Okay? But when you shuffle, okay, we just talked about how important huge turns are and how important constant pressure is, right? Now let's take that deck that has 9 blues just sitting at the bottom and let's shuffle it. What did you just do? That means statistically, what you've done is the next 7 to 8 hands that you draw, take 1 red card out and put in a blue. That's statistically what you have done, okay? Now, why is that horrible? Well, the Fatigue Briar deck operates on such a small margin that all it needs is you to slip up just a little bit each and every turn, whether it be fire a blue arrow instead of a red. That one change is the difference between them being able to arsenal and make Crown of Seeds live via Tunic. It makes the difference of whether they have to take 3 damage to send a 7 attack or whether they have to take 6 damage to send a 7 attack. And it's absolutely massive, okay? I would make the argument that the only mistake that I saw Craig make was actually running the remembrances and shuffling that deck. I think, other than missing on the 3 of a kinds, that's super unfortunate and that happens. But shuffling that deck, I guarantee you did not help that. Not in the least bit. So, now, if your deck now I see Jason in the chat. One thing that I will say is everything that I'm going over right now kind of doesn't apply to Dromai, right? Dromai, all your cards are good, right? And you specifically need certain cards over and over again, like Chromai, Mirror Guy, cards like that. So that would be a different situation. Some of this stuff could align with like the Empress version that runs a lot more attacks, things like that. It could be some of these strategies could be utilized in a list that leans more in that direction. But especially like Big Dragon or something like that, if you're a Dromai player, you just need to find a middle ground between what you would do into Bravo and what you would do into Briar. And you don't want to lose too much equity if you're wrong and they're on the regular Briar. If you can figure that out, that's your best avenue. Sorry that illusionists operate on a whole different axis than every other deck in the game. I wish I could give you more value, and we'll talk about it at the end if any illusionist players like want to discuss it or brainstorm or anything like that. I am all about it. Just trying to help people out. That's it. Okay, so the number one thing you need to be doing every single turn is understanding what their tunic's at. It's the most important thing. Okay? This first line here, we're not dealing with fucking Oldhim. Okay? This Briar deck without if you take away the Boots, Brothers in Arms, and Oasis, the deck has no way to utilize excess resources if they activate Crown of Seeds. Unless you're dealing arcane damage. Okay? Therefore, if you are a non-arcane damage dealing hero, then you don't have to worry about Crown of Seeds unless one of those things happens. Okay? So why is this important? Why do we care about Tunic in the relation to Crown of Seeds? Okay? Well, what it allows us to do is pick better windows to push more damage. Okay? Let's think about it. If Tunic counters on 1 and 2 counters on 2, they don't have access to efficient Crown of Seeds, like I said, unless they have a Brothers in Arms or Oasis. And even then, it's not the most efficient. Okay? It's doable. It's worth activating, but it's not like, oh, that's so much value. But when Tunic counters on 3 and they have the ability to take that Tunic counter and Crown and basically just heal for 1, and then create a whole nother card to block with, that is what Oldhim was doing every single turn because Oldhim had Rampart to dump the resources into and keep it efficient. This deck does not have that. So what we want to do is we want to have consistent damage while Tunic counter is on 1 and high damage while Tunic is on 2. Now, why is there a differentiation, right? Why not high damage on both? Okay, well, it's kind of hard to maintain a high damage output, but if you can do that, then congratulations. However, the reason that pushing higher damage while Tunic counter is on 2 is you make them pay a higher price to then be able to leverage Crown of Seeds on the following turn when Tunic counter will be on 3. Does that make sense? So what we're trying to do is increase the opportunity cost that the Briar player is going to have to pay to put that card in Arsenal to make Crown. Because I'm telling you, when Tunic counter is on 2 and your turn starts, what they're doing is they're blocking as much damage as possible and saying, what's the least amount of damage I can take to put any card in Arsenal? It can be a shit blue. It can be whatever the card. It does not matter. Obviously there's like a hierarchy, right? Red D reacts are number 1. Well, when Tunic counter is about to be on 3, it's attack number 1, then D react, and then shit blue, right? That's kind of like the hierarchy, if you will, as far as like Arsenal priority. Now, while Tunic counters on 1 or 2, there's a higher priority placed on putting D-Reacts in Arsenal because you're less incentivized to crown them away, and so forth. So understanding those windows and when to actually push damage is especially important against this deck. Okay, now the deck has the inability to leverage full tempo. Okay, now we saw perfect examples of we've seen a couple examples of when Craig was um, just passing with a couple cards in hand and not ever really punished or anything like that. So there's a lot of heroes in the game. I just put some on the screen just as kind of an example that can really leverage that, right? Obviously, Phi is like a super favorable matchup against this deck, right? Because you have everything's low to the ground. Embodiment doesn't mean shit when you're attacking for 1s and 2s. You have consistent throughput, right? That's why I said it's not all. If it was all about damage stacking, Phi wouldn't be that good into the deck, right? Because Phi doesn't really damage. He can, right? You can sit back and wait on an Art of War. But it's the fact that the numbers are weird and he can consistently do 14 damage every single turn. And that's enough to shake up the deck and make it where he can't Arsenal and things like that. Stay mindful of the fact that there's little disruption within this list. My original math Briar, value Briar, whatever you want to call it, mine had pummels. And the reason I added them into the deck was so I could kind of negate as much of this slide as possible, right? I found that a lot of opponents would just pass, kind of set stuff up, and pummel is a great way to kind of negate that effect a little bit. Am I saying you should have pummel in your fatigue Briar list? Absolutely not, because the meta cannot support any more 2 blocks, right? You're kind of throwing the Lexi matchup a little bit. Although, you catch them with 1 CNC pummel, because they're going to disrespect it every single time. You can steal a game. You can steal a game. Maybe 1 or 2 pummels is actually pretty decent. You just kind of put it in Arsenal as a high priority and then see the CNC, but don't commit to it. Maybe it's worth trying. You guys let me know. The most important part about this concept, though, like, think about it, right? You're taking a whole turn off. You're saying, okay, they're throwing 7 at me. Let me block 3 cards, and I'm just going to keep this very important card in my hand, and I'm just going to pass turn, not worry about the aspect of value, but more so just, I'm trying to kill this dude. So you draw 3 more cards. But what was the net effect of that? The net effect was you lost 3 cards from your deck. Okay? That may be super impactful. It may not, right? If Phi draws a hand of like 3 blues and he blocks with 2 of them, is that going to ruin his chances of actually killing this deck? Absolutely not. Now, a deck like Bravo, where he has to block with where it actually comes down to actual card economy, it's massively impactful, and you can't play on that same axis. But any deck that kind of has like a natural hedge against this type of playstyle, do not be scared to just sit back, let them take full tempo once or twice, just to set up something very big. Do not be afraid to do that. It's very, very difficult for them to punish it. Very difficult. Even Lexi. Like, Lexi has, it is a card economy game, but at the same time, you're so explosive. And if you're confident in your ability to have the offense to close the game, feel free to do it. Feel free to do it. Last point on this one is the fatigue Briar player is always going to be the one to dictate the speed. Now, why do we give a shit about that? Well, let's assume we'll get into it in the next slide. So the reason that it's important that the Briar player dictates the speed of the game is we're once again going to use a Lexi example. Let's use the example of Lexi has two ways that she can kind of approach this matchup. And you can either run like the 66, 67 arrow plus double remembrance in Abyssal Depth quiver, and then just kind of kill them via deck damage. That is a legit strategy that does work into this deck. Do not be scared of Evergreen. You have to have life to cast Evergreen, so that is a valid strategy. Okay. However, there's a huge asterisk there, right? When you flip over this quiver, okay, and your opponent asks you how many cards you presented, and you say 68 or 69, okay? If you, the Briar player, they now have an incentive to take damage and send 7 more often, right? What kind of environment does that create, right? It creates a situation where they're taking a little bit down. It's not a fatigue match anymore. What they're actively doing is just mid-ranging you down and getting you to a point to where you're blocking with 2 cards every single turn. And if they can acquire that at any point, they win the game, because Rangers just don't do anything with 2-card hands, right? So you have to be aware of that. And that strategy becomes a lot easier when you draw cards like Remembrance, right? And you shuffle those blues and things like that. So just be mindful that if you run the fat deck strategy, whatever you want to call it, of Abyssal Quiver and a couple Remembrance and a whole bunch of arrows, they can say, okay, let me block less and just send 7. And you're either going to block the attacks, which puts them ahead on card economy, whether you have Remembrance or not, or you're going to eat the 7 and you're going to be on a very short clock, right? Now, there is testing to be done to whether you still win on that front, right? Because you do have a lot of on-hit effects, right? And for them to engage in that strategy, you basically have to, you have to soak some of the on-hits, right? So it's very, very, very important. We've already talked about shuffling and what that does to your blue to red ratio and how that's not what you want to be doing. So the main thing that you need to do is not be somewhere in the middle. Okay, either try to do the Remembrance Abyssal Depth and win via deck damage and consistent pressure, just throwing 14 damage a turn and them just running out of cards, right? Believe it or not, toward the end of the Oldham era, Lexes were fatiguing Oldham with 3 Remembrance and Abyssal Quiver, because they would just keep reaching for Battering Bolt, Codex, whatever. And when you send Battering Bolt for 7 damage enough times, you're getting enough cards to where the Oldham player would actually run out of cards. And you can do the same thing here. However, that requires a very specific build of Lexi that has very little ice, because you need that many arrows, right? So be very careful of that. Okay. I do agree. Rustling Leaves is the best quiver. That is a fact. I'm just saying that this is a valid strategy if you want to attack it on that axis. What you don't want to do is be somewhere in the middle. Like, for example, one thing that Craig was doing that I don't necessarily agree with. I mean, I'm more than willing to be wrong, but he was running the quiver, Remembrance, but then doing like the give up full tempo and set up a big turn. Well, those strategies are conflicting, right? Why would you run Remembrance if your strategy is to have a couple huge turns? You're not doing anything via deck damage. You're not worried about running out of cards. You're trying to kill him in 3 turns, right? 3 really good turns. So I didn't understand that thought process. I might be missing something, more than willing to accept that, but that was just my initial analysis of the play. Um, you like I said, you need to approach the matchup with urgency to prevent the Briar player from speeding the match up and forcing you, basically blocking less and always sending a 7 instead of just blocking out. Michael said, I disagree with how Craig played the matchup, but was also, I agree. He actually whiffed 3 times. I think he played the matchup perfectly as far as sequencing, setting up, passing with 3 cards in hand. Like, he was doing every single thing he needed to do. I just don't understand what role Remembrance did other than give Charles an opportunity to slap a CNC on him. Because he drew that Remembrance and he went, here's 3 more arrows. And then what did Charles do? Here's a CNC, block with 2 of the arrows that I theoretically just refilled, right? So all he did was provide Charles with an opportunity to get the cards that he put back in the deck. Just doesn't make sense. That's my thought process. But he played it amazing. I just think that there were some cards in his deck that kind of didn't coincide with the strategy he was trying to execute. But he played it amazing. If you are running Bravo, or maybe you're the one Briar player that's still running Rites of Replenishment after Oldham's gone, plan for the last push of Last Ditch Effort. It's no joke. It is no joke. You need to be able to combat that. If you're ever in a situation where, that's why I think it's actually a mistake. Bravo players might say, okay, they have Evergreen. If they play Evergreen, it's not a card out of deck, but if they attack me with anything else, it's a card out of deck. I block 2 cards, take 1 damage, swing Anathos for 6, right? The problem is, I think you lose that trade. Because they're coming in for what will be 7 every single time, every single rotation, right? And they're going to keep their life total high. Or they'll block 4 with a 4 block and intentionally take a little bit of life to then leverage the life gain that's built into the deck. So for Bravo, I think you need to leverage a slightly more aggressive strategy. Run those Zealous Beltings, of course, Rouse, right? Pulverize, cards like that. And then actively kind of, don't worry about dominating. Shit's not going to hit. Don't worry about that. But you just need to get as many cards from their deck via cards from your deck. And Anathos does not force that transaction, right? Starstruck does. They have to block that if they want to attack. Well, I guess theoretically they could take 6 and then send 7. But if they're taking 6, then it's kind of going against the Evergreen plan. So Anathos just doesn't come in for enough to kind of force a transactional, advantage. Walking life down is a positive to turn off the life gain. Every single ounce of life gain in that deck revolves around, obviously, it being lower life, not only due to Reaping Blade, but it's printed on the damn cards, Fighting Spirit, Heart, Oasis. And like we talked about earlier, deck damage actually is a valid win con for some heroes and some builds, but it has to be very specific, and you got to push a lot of damage to actually get there. Okay. This is just something that I put up. I didn't do like a whole bunch of I didn't research like every single deck in the format and like come up with super spicy tech cards and stuff like that. I just thought to myself, if I was playing this deck, what would I not want to see? And this is what I could come up with, chat. A little something for everybody. You have Imperial Edict for Kano players. You play this on board. You name Oasis Respite. You know they're going to harvest an arsenal for as long as humanly possible, and they can no longer play it. And then you have a big turn, get value, whatever the case may be. That's your kind of like tech card you could add to Kano. I mean, I think they were doing that to Oldhim, right? I think I saw Chris Lyali run something along those lines into Oldhim. You should approach it the exact same way. The only problem is if you run into a regular Briar and you have this in your deck, it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough, but it is what it is. Inertia, that's a no-brainer, right? Inertia, Crown of Seeds. Mike said you don't need Edict. Yeah, you might not. Like I said, this is not a to beat the deck. You have to add these. You have to add these cards. I'm no way saying that. I'm saying that maybe you're in a Nats that's like a smaller Nats, like 30, 40 people, and you know a lot of people are going to switch to this deck. These are some ideas that you could just simply add into a deck to kind of make it increase the win percentage even more. But I do agree. You don't need anything on this page. Talisman of Tithe is great at shutting down the Crown of Seeds rotation. It's a very weird card that does not fit into a lot of decks. It does come at a high opportunity cost because the card does not block. But we just talked about how there's no opportunity cost associated with seizing up tempo and giving it up and playing cards like this, right? The next time they would activate it on your action phase. The one thing that you have to be mindful of is when you play this card, you have to apply pressure the same turn it's played, or else they'll just activate Crown of Seeds on that turn and use it up, right? But it just makes it where if they would draw one card on your action phase, instead they draw that many -1, right? So they would crown. It negates the first crown activation, quote unquote. They still get the damage prevention, but they do not draw the replacement card. Lightning Press is the best card you could add to your Lexi deck to combat this deck. Let me explain. If you have let's say you have a face-up Endless Arrow, and you have face down Lightning Press or something, and you can flip the Lightning Press, give your next attack, go again, send the Endless Arrow. You of course have the information, or you have the situation where, oh, are they going to press it or are they not? Of course. But more importantly, like we talked about earlier with the damage mapping of your turn, you no longer have an arrow in arsenal. They have no fucking clue what is coming next. They have no way to analyze, and that's why Lightning Surge is up here as well, is it's just kind of like another way to create the same situation, right? Do you give up a damage by sending the arrow in arsenal? Sure. Like, theoretically, you could, I don't know. But the point is, you're firing out the arrow that's already in arsenal so that they have no idea what's coming. And they're not able to properly do a value analysis of what's to come because they have no clue. Whereas if you fire an arrow, and then go from there. The most frightening on hit is actually Bolt and Shot. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Because it breaks the normal. Bolt and Shot shakes up the damage mapping, right? Or the turn mapping, if you will. Because you can say arrow, 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 and there's nothing else, right? Whereas Bolt and Shot, if they throw in a fourth arrow, then it just throws everything off. And you don't know how to analyze that. and you're taking an extra on hit that may not be necessary. And Lightning Press pushes that even further. And Lightning Press also makes it where your bolt and shots are always live because you flip up the Lightning Press, fire the arrow in arsenal, and then you use it on that quote unquote arsenal or that arrow, or you save it, load the bolt and shot, and then you have the same like Rain Razors interaction where if you use it, it makes the reload live. So easily the best card you could add to a Lexi deck to combat this deck is Lightning Press. Okay. Inertia, Crown of Seeds, everybody knows that those are like hate relationship. And then Command and Conquer. Why is Command and Conquer good against a deck that has Crown of Seeds? And I'll tell you why. One, it's only good against decks that go, it's only good when played with the decks that go wide. Okay? Because what you're doing, if you can play a CNC while Tunic Counter is on 1 or 2, you're forcing a rotation of the arsenal. More than likely. Because, you play an attack, they block. You play an attack, they block. Maybe whatever, and then CNC, right? Either they have enough block or they don't. Maybe you get a little armor. The point is you apply pressure when they're not on that Tunic Counter. If they're on the Tunic Counter, card's dog shit. Easy peasy. But Razor Reflex, same reason I gave earlier. Same thing for Pommel. They really want to be using the D-Reacts for those breakpoints and not in response to a reaction. They, of course, will if they need to. But it's not what the deck is ultimately trying to do. The deck is just trying to extract as much value as humanly possible. It's basically a spreadsheet simulator. Exude Confidence. Exude Confidence, obviously, it kind of forces any interaction up front. You basically demand from them, hey, do you want a Crown of Seas? If you're going to do it right now. Especially if you have a pump attached to said Exude. And then obviously the denial of D-Reacts is amazing. Don't rely on that. It's not as good as you think. There's not that many D-Reacts. There are some. There's not like that many. Frostlock is cool. Blue Winter's Bite is absolute dog shit into this deck. Because they can, one, pay the resources, pay for your Frostbite, and Crown of Seeds on a blue. Yellow and up is pretty decent into the deck because you force a card. Mischievous Meeps is good into the deck because you are like low to the ground. And depending on when you play this on the combat chain, it could force, if you play this early, it forces cards before they have more information, or you can play it late after they've already blocked suitable threats, things like that. And just the fact that it's anything that's low to the ground creates a suboptimal situation for the deck. Cards like Double Strike, stuff like that. Obviously, anything that's low to the ground is advantageous. Okay. And in closing, I like playing against Fatigue. It's fun because I get to win for longer, right? That's another thing that I said over the weekend. Kind of as a little fun jab, but that's kind of the idea. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them. If you want to talk about deck specifics, I'd love to answer them. Sideboarding slot, whatever you guys need, I'm here for it. Or if you want to talk about something else, we can talk about something else. Also, one thing before I get into any questions from chat, if you guys have any, is I didn't talk a lot about Icelander. And I will explain why. Sorry, reading something real quick. Yep. Justin was just saying that basically you could do the Professor Cropper's my favorite teacher. Anything for you, Sam? Anything for you? Yeah, if anybody has any questions, please let me know. But like I said, I didn't talk about Icelander a whole lot, okay? And the reason for that is that matchup is so unique that nothing that applies to that matchup applies to anything else. And it's like not even close. What I can tell you is go watch the Dan Rakowski game against Charles Dunn. Okay? Just like, okay, so it's very important that it's basically a dance between Frost Hex and Diabolic Ultimatum. Okay? It's kind of how the matchup shapes up. If anybody recalls when Charles Dunn played Michael Hamilton in the finals of the second Indianapolis Calling, if you remember anything about that matchup, you would remember that he was on like the Warhorn fatigue strategy with Oldham, and he didn't see his Warhorn to like the bottom cards or something along those lines, and he lost the match. And I'm not saying he lost because of that. I'm just saying that like it made the matchup way harder than it needed to be, and Michael Hamilton was able to win. In the Dan Rakowski matchup, the lower your Diabolic Ultimatums are is actually better, believe it or not. Because, I know that sounds crazy, you do not want to see the ultimatums quickly. You want to see them late. And he saw all three at like the bottom half of his deck. Which, once again, I'm not saying that that's why he won. I'm not saying anything along those lines. He played it amazingly. Skill got him there. I'm just saying that that was a fortunate aspect of that particular match that I realized, or that I observed. And I'll explain, okay? So, basically, pre-tournament, so they weren't super fair. Yep. Dan entered. Okay, I didn't see that part. Should I do a video on how to beat Briar every time with Icelander? Well, if anybody can make one, Lucas, it would be you. Just don't have me in the video or it'll make you look bad. I did not know that Dan entered. But theoretically, what you want to do is you want to play out your chills like he did. You want to cycle your Frost Hexes to the bottom, and then you want to play them in succession, right? You want to play them on the board very quickly, not give the opponent the opportunity to clear them at no cost. If they do play an ultimatum out, you need to be able to push the Arcane to punish. And then also, you need to close the game out with preferably a double Ice Eternal. One on your turn, one on their turn, and to close it out. But for the most part, what I saw of the match, which was like all but like the last 5 minutes, Dan was playing everything perfectly. You block with anything that does not produce an active threat. Cold Snap is dog shit. Polar Blast does nothing. Frosting is trash. All those cards that don't have quote-unquote threat density, you just block with them. You move on about your plan. You play your chills. You do whatever, but you just block with anything that's not an Ice Vein or Red Attack or anything like that. And kind of... but the reason that you get an advantage with the lower your ultimatums are is you, even with Crown of Seeds, most of the time, believe it or not, the Icelander will cycle through their deck faster than you will. And that's because several turns throughout that match, the Briar player more than likely will end with a card in hand to possibly prevent the arcane damage that would have happened if the Icelander player chose to do so. Because they're trying to get their health total as high as possible. So when you're ending the turn with a card in hand, you're drawing one less card. And you're not crowning every turn because there's certain cards that hold a higher priority, like Oasis and things like that. And go again attacks, stuff like that, hold a very high premium, and you are just actively not cycling through your deck as fast as you normally would. They obviously are activating Crown Seeds every now and again, but not as often as you would think. Okay, because Icelander also has like priority windows in between Crown of Seeds before it resolves, where they can just get in all their arcane damage before you even get the extra card, and it's an okay card into Icelander. But why that, once again, why it's important that the ultimatums are in the bottom half of the deck is because he's cycling through his deck at a slower rate. Then you basically, I said to Pat and Charles the night before in top 8, Icelander cycles faster. Yeah, exactly. My advice to Charles was sometimes to crown at the start of turn before doing anything. Yeah, exactly. For that reason. And because his ultimatums were at the bottom, if they were at the top, then he would have to see them very early and then have a long way to go to see them, right? Whereas in this case, when they're at the bottom, he had the ability to, every time Icelander coordinate peaks, you throw a red away, right? You don't pitch it, you throw the bitch in the bin, right? You just throw it in the graveyard, and that's one less red card in your deck. That is all you were trying to do, and you're thinning your deck, okay? And when you do that, so when the ultimatums are at the bottom, you go through less cards to be able to see them in a row. Whereas if they're in the top, then you have to go a much longer distance before you actually see them in the cycle. So that's why I didn't talk about the Icelander matchup specifically, is because there's so many nuances on both sides. I've played the matchup, but it just takes, I will say that the deck I would say that the deck has 100% win rate into Icelanders that are below average. But I would say that the deck has a 15-20% win rate into Icelanders that are top tier. That's what my testing has shown. So you can take it for what you will. What are you playing post Briar ban? I don't know. I have actually no clue. The one thing that I do know is I'm actually glad that I caught Ethan's stream this afternoon, or caught some of it. Not sure if he's in here or not, but he had a little segment in his stream that he did this afternoon that kind of like resonated with me, because it's exactly what I've been going through kind of the past couple months, where basically, to sum it up, like there's a lot of variance associated with Levia, and he's not able to perform as high as he can. That I know it can, right? I know he's a solid player. I've seen him play. And he's being on the team that he is, Team Runaways, right? And they're doing all the testing and the prepping, coming up with great deck lists like this Fatigue Briar list. And he's just playing Levia, right? And kind of like not performing as good as he wants. And, it's kind of like disregarding a resource that you have access to is the way he put it. And I thought it was amazing. So it seems like he is ready to kind of step away from being a quote unquote specialist, right? Because when you are a specialist, you kind of like pigeonhole yourself into a lot of difficult situations, because there's times like you just know it's not the right time for a hero, and you just come up with the best version you possibly can and like try and make it work, even though you know it's wrong. So he's trying to kind of change his mentality and kind of like say, look, he's just going to play something else for Worlds. And he even admitted to exactly what kind of happened to me the past 2 tournaments I went to, where I was like, I'm not playing Briar. And a couple weeks before the event, before Pro Tour, I was like, oh yeah, there's gonna be a lot of Oldham. I love that matchup. It's really favorable for me. And so I talked myself into playing Briar. That's all. All I needed was one good reason. If I could come up with one solid reason, we're playing Briar, right? But to answer your question, what I plan on doing is not being a specialist. That's the plainest way that I know to put it. I'm going to try and just play what I think has the highest chance of winning and going from there. I will not, I'm not jumping straight to other rune blades. I just don't like the other rune blades as much. Vis is cool. I like Viscerai. But ever since they got rid of combo Vis, I kind of haven't liked the deck as much as I would like. But I'm playing around with. I'm making like a value ninja list. I'm making. Probably gonna start playing a little bit of Dromai because I think that'll be decent in the new coming set. Things like that. I'm just trying to broaden my horizons where I will eventually land on just what I think is the most competitively viable. Simple as that. So chat, I'm all ears. If you have any questions and we'll talk about anything, whether it's related to the Briar deck or not, I'm open for whatever. Just chat. I do not plan on playing any gameplay today for the sole reason that it was a long weekend. It was a very, very long weekend. I'm just trying to get some sleep so I can spend some time with the family in the morning and stuff like that. So I'm not gonna go for like too crazy long with gameplay and stuff like that. And plus, I'm kind of looking for a deck to play. You know, I'm in that spot. But yeah, I'm all ears for any questions that you guys may have. If there's any Dromai players, I would love to hear like what your guys' opinion on approaching the matchup. I'll be the first to admit I'm not the most knowledgeable about Illusionist. I know how to play against it. I don't know. How much money did you lose gambling last week? Well, let's talk about that. Why not? No, I played poker for, it was not the highest EV play, but what I did was on Friday night, I played till 3 in the morning. No, it was Friday night. I played till like 3 in the morning. So I went to the draft pod with like 3 hours of sleep on Saturday afternoon. And yeah, that did not help my draft that I then won 2, but then I won all my CC games when I finally woke up, I guess. I don't know. I just really enjoy the game of poker. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun when you playing with people you know. We were having a blast, laughing at the table. Like half the table was just fab players. The other people had no fucking clue what we were talking about. we were like asking everybody how they did today, and we were like, yeah, X2. And then some old dude in the corner was just like, yeah, I went X3. So then we just started dying laughing. It was the funniest shit. It was a good time though. It was a good time. Wouldn't change it for the world. Got home Monday, almost, yeah, bro. I stayed up again Sunday night playing poker as well, and yeah, it was just a lot of fun. You looking forward to playing any board games or something not fab soon? That's a great question. I actually bought a couple boxes of this game. For those of you who don't know, that is Lorcana. Now, I'm not saying I'm playing it, okay? You just have to understand that I have 2 kids. Okay, I got a 2-year-old and I have a daughter that just turned 6 today, actually. So I have a 6-year-old, and I actually bought 2 boxes of Lorcana, and I wanted to like open it with her, and like, you know, she loves all the characters and stuff like that. And so that was an amazing time. Will I play it? Probably not, but like maybe. I don't know. I have some cards in front of me. I might can like throw something together. I'm not sure. But it was I might dab in it a little bit. It's not something I'm going to sink a lot of time into because I don't have the time to split between multiple games. It's just not feasible. When you got the wife, the kids, you know, all that going on, and you're already like playing too much Fab where it stands, it's kind of hard to fit something else in. So I might do a little bit of it, you know, with her and stuff like that. But other than that, not too much. I am running Baldur's Gate 3. Do you call it a campaign or just like a game of whatever? I'm running a session, if you will, with a couple Fab players in the local area. Joshua Lau is included. We're playing like we get together a couple nights a week or whatever and kind of play a little bit. I have never played Dungeons and Dragons before ever, so it was like a new experience for me. But I'm enjoying it so far. We just got done with Act 1, so we're taking it kind of slow. We're not like hardcore grinding it or anything like that, but it's a good game. Divinity Original Sin 2 is one of my favorite games ever made, and it's from the same studio, so it's completely different, but it's still good. Will you come in with me and Kyle to the 5? Are y'all doing a 5K in Atlanta for Lorcana? That would be I could pull a Dagon and get kicked out. Talking shit to some little kid, telling them they missed their trigger. Want to get some sushi? Go in. But y'all wanted to play poker the whole time. Yeah. Sorry about that. But it was a blast. It was when you told that guy that you'd been waiting and you weren't on the list, that shit had me dying. That was the funniest thing. It's in Tennessee. Okay. Hard maybe. But because I don't even have like a whole deck. I mean, I was lucky enough to actually pull between 2 boxes. I pulled like 3 copies of Be Prepared, one of them foil. And apparently that's one that goes in like every deck in your mama's basically. And so I have a good stash of staples right now, but I'm definitely gonna have to like add to it. But that's no big deal. No big deal. I do enjoy going to Tennessee every single time. Oh, Jason, next time you see Naib, tell him I said congratulations on the top 8. I expect nothing less. And congratulations to you on your 10th. I think it was 10th place at US Nats. That's awesome. I know it's not top 8, but it's an amazing performance nonetheless. I've been in that spot so many times. Just don't get used to it like I did. It's okay to happen like once or twice. Just don't get used to it. You got to break into that top 8 and really convert. If anybody can do it, it's you. You need all 3 of those. Yep. All right. Well, if I'm going to kind of segue into a closing, I'm not going anywhere, but I'm just going to kind of start talking about the last couple things that I wanted to talk about. And then, like, if you guys have any questions on while that's going down, I'll answer them as I'm kind of segueing out. But really appreciate everybody that came up all 66 people that came up and said they really enjoy the content, the stream, stuff like that. I really do appreciate you guys. Let me know that. It means the world. I will be at Dallas. Originally, I thought I would not be at Dallas because I didn't know when the ELO cutoff was, and like I didn't want to be fresh off my hero and then go to like calling and like kind of like risk messing up my ELO for the invite. But apparently, the invite is on 19 September, which is like a month before Dallas. So we're good. I should be locked for my Worlds invite, and then we'll go gamble away some ELO in Dallas. And see if a specialist can learn something new. Are there some fun decks for lesser competitive things? One thing that I've always been an advocate of that I enjoy playing is Hatchet Dory. I've done a stream if you're interested in checking that out. It's probably the third stream I ever did. It's not a terrible deck. It kind of operates on the axis of value, kind of how the Fatigue Briar does. Just instead of blocking for 4, you have like 1 block on the boots every single turn kind of deal. So it's like the same theory, if you will. But I made that deck list and played that a lot, and that is something that I enjoy playing from time to time. You know, you're not taking down a Nats with it more than likely. I mean, you could. Anything's possible. But it's a couple card shot. There's a couple cards that are yellow that you really need to be red and stuff like that for it to be extremely viable. So I will be in Dallas. I'm definitely not going to travel to these battle hardens. I'm just kind of exhausted from traveling a lot. Went to Atlanta, went to Vegas, going to Spain, more than likely. Just a lot of traveling, right? Kind of wore out. Got to go to Dallas. I'm not Michael Fang. I'm not Brody Spurlock. I can't just throw a bunch of ham sandwiches in a bag and go battle harden to battle harden to battle harden. Just can't do it. Just can't do it. A shout out to those guys. Those guys killed it as well. I talked a lot with Michael and Brody over the weekend, just chatting about. Talked about Brody's draft and how we both drafted Bolton. We sat next to each other and registered each other's deck, and his deck was 10 times better than mine was. But we both ended 1-2 in our pod for the second draft. So, it was insane. When he told me that, I did not believe it. But Zach Bunn in the chat. Okay, we got to go to Dallas. Well, I'm going to Dallas. We gotta give you some competition, right? We gotta give you and the Wolfpack some competition. I'll definitely be in Dallas, 100%. Just will not be at St. Louis. That's a little far to go for a battle harden, you know. I'll leave it to Michael and Brody to take that one down. But it was great seeing everybody this past weekend. Had an amazing time. Wish I could have converted a little bit higher, but that's okay. We take it. We take it. Briar's gone as of 2.5 weeks. Right after the conclusion of national season is when the official LL announcement will hit, and then no more Briar after that, which means that the battle harden in Portland, Columbus, and Florence will not include Briar, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, there could also be bans associated with that. So the whole meta could be shaken up. We have no clue. On that topic, I'm very interested to see like what LSS, you know, the one spot that LSS is going to be in, you know, if a lot of people are saying that Lexi is overtuned, which I kind of agree. You know, you can't say, oh well, if Fatigue Briar can beat it, then it's not too strong, because that deck will no longer be in the format. So I don't envy the spot that LSS is going to be in for that announcement. And I'm not saying it's right to ban or not to ban. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that a lot of people are complaining about how tuned Lexi is. And yep, Dallas is post bright lights. I just remember that. So that'll make it all the better. All the better. We'll be attaching equipment, playing with tanks, all kind of shit. If that's not fun, I don't know what is. It's not as fun as 2-2 though. That's a fact. But I'm super excited for that event. I will definitely 100% be at Dallas. Just not the smaller stuff. But if there's anybody joining that missed the beginning part, there will be a VOD for that, for that part of the video. It should be up in like 12 to 13 hours, give or take. YouTube's got to do its thing, and then the VOD will be up. I wish anybody playing any Nats or Battle Hardens over the next 3 weeks the best of luck. And if you watched this VOD or this stream and you take down a Fatigue Briar, look him in the eye and tell him Nathan sent you. Okay? Just tell him you watched the video and they didn't stand a chance. Don't tell him that. Don't tell him that. It's not very sportsman. But just throw it in there. Just be like, yeah, Nathan sent me, What you gonna do about it? So let's see. What would you ban to keep Lexi down a little bit? This is a slippery slope. It's a trap, but I'm gonna fall for it. So it's kind of a tough situation, because the problem is Lexi has the trifecta. She has action points on a stick. She has disruption. She has on hit. She has break points. She has all the go again she wants. She has card draw. She has recursion and graveyard. I mean, just everything, right? So if you take out the card that most people are probably raising their pitchforks for, is Three of a Kind, right? Three of a Kind doesn't change the fact that if you play against an aggro deck and they flip over Arctic Incarceration and play it and give you 4 Frostbites, if you don't have a blue, you literally just pass turn with 4 cards in hand. The deck just does so much. I'm not saying that Red Arctic should be banned. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying the deck does too much. No deck should be able to disrupt like that, slap you in the face with break points and on hits, and have access to a whole bunch of go again. James White himself has said that Voltaire is a problem weapon. If there's any Lexi players in the chat, don't waste your time typing it in. I know that if you take away Voltaire, the deck's dead. I understand that. But at the same time, you kind of like, they said the same thing about Winter's Will, and Michael Hamilton just discarded the deck, right? And then it won the next calling. Or it didn't win the next calling, but it made up half of the top 8, right? If I was going to make a surgical ban toward Lexi, the 2 cards I would entertain is Three of a Kind and Bolt and Shot. That would be my... That's what I would do. I'm not saying both. I'm just saying, those are the things I would look at and say, if I take this out of the equation, does it fix the problem? Because if you take out Bolt and Shot, then you inadvertently nerf Three of a Kind. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal on 1 card. You have to put crappier blues in, you have Pathing Helix, and which some people are already running blue Helix, but there's not that many zero cost arrows that are good, and you're kind of forcing Lexi to play those. And so I think those two would probably be, yeah. Infecting Shot's not good enough. I don't think that really does. I don't think banning an Infecting Shot really does anything. Plan to go to St. Louis and get Vincent on the map. I wish you the best of luck. Better man than I taking Vincent. I hope it's absolutely possible, but we'll see. Right where things stand, I'm not testing Vincent. I'm not going to test Vincent, but I promise you, the second she gets new cards, it's the first deck that I'm looking at, the first one. But until then, they just can't. It's just the whole fatigue situation where, like, no matter what you do, if the player knows what they are doing, there's nothing you can do to beat that strategy. Unless you just like make your deck actively worse into everything else in the field. So, but I think that's going to be it for the stream, unless anybody has any last questions. It's got to be Codex. Zach, that's a great point. Like, if I could have a perfect world, Zach, I'm glad you actually said this, because what I would do is I would just remove the word Ranger from the bottom of all the codexes. That's what I would do. If you remove the word Ranger from the bottom of all the codices, yeah, that word, and you make it Assassin only card, I think it's perfectly fine, because Assassin really needs that card to like force the opponent to play in patterns where it's beneficial to them and threaten things that actually exist, instead of having a bunch of on-hit effects that you can inadvertently just never put a card in Arsenal and don't have to worry about half their on-hits. So if that was the case, if they would just remove the word Ranger at the bottom of Codex, I think it's perfectly. Skipping St. Louis could stay with me. Shane, I really do appreciate it. Maybe things change, but I'm exhausted from traveling. But we'll see. I think it's like a ways away, right? Isn't it like 2 weekends before Worlds or something? I'm not saying I'm 100% out. I'm just saying it's improbable. But yeah, if I could like, but I know erratas are horrible for the game, right? I know erratas are horrible for the game, and that's like the worst kind of errata is like literally. Oh, I could just imagine Ranger players showing up to armories with codexes in their deck, and they're like, "Oh, you can't play that," but it says Ranger at the bottom. Too bad, stuff like that. Heat Seeker is not the hit, because Heat Seeker, what makes Heat Seeker balanced is after Snapdragons are utilized, Heat Seeker actually turns into a liability, because you can it's one of my favorite plays against Lexi playing with Briar is I will actively, if they've already burned their Snapdragons, I will let Heat Seekers hit a lot of the time just to force the trigger and clog up the arsenal. It doesn't happen a lot, but it is an option that I have. So I like a card that starts out very powerful at the beginning of the game, but if they leverage a piece of their equipment too early, it turns that card into a liability. I think that's great design. Fantastic design. I just hope whatever the fix is, if they even do a fix, I hope it does not involve an errata, because we all know how painful those are. Maybe it is suspend Codex until Lexi's gone, but if I was an Assassin player, I'd be so pissed. I would be so mad. Because you have to think that ban would hurt assassins so bad because one, you're making their deck weaker, and then you're making the deck that their existence is validated by, and you're making it weaker. Yeah. If you ban Codex, like Assassin is just not banning Codex hurts them, and then the whole reason you're playing Assassin right now is to beat Lexi. And if you make Lexi worse, there's less Lexis. You make Assassin even worse. Like it's rough. It's rough. That's why I alluded to Bolt and Shot in 3 of a Kind, is because Azalea likes Bolt and Shot. I understand that. And it's a big hit to Azalea. I'm not underestimating it. But, you know, I don't know. That's the only 2 cards that I see. I guess you could do Rain Razors, but like that also hurts Azalea. I don't know. It'd be interesting. It'd be super interesting. But they're the ones that have all the knowledge, and you know, I will admit, listening to the dev discussion, if you guys haven't listened to that, they did a Twitter Spaces with Brian Gottlieb and a lot of the devs, and you know, they just talked about the metagame. I think it was like literally like 4 days before the Nats season actually started. So I think it was like Wednesday. It's on the Flesh and Blood Twitter. If you haven't listened to that, go listen to it. Those devs have their finger on the pulse. They're super knowledgeable. I have absolute confidence in their ability to balance this game. 100%. Can't have 3 Husk a game. 100% agree, Shane. That's the power of 3 of a Kind, because when they got rid of Bullseye Bracers, 3 of a Kind literally became a, if somebody's attacking into me, it's the most broken card in the game. But if the Lexi player has full tempo, it's kind of just like a play this so I can like upgrade the arrows that I was already throwing this turn. So instead of throwing a blue drill shot that was in my hand, I'll send a red searing shot kind of situation. So it's not like that good. But what that does is that disincentivizes any aggro deck to play into you, because you could just block that much damage and then just refill your hand. I know that card was probably created in correlation with like Rapid Fire and stuff like that, but I don't understand how drawing 3 cards in a game where that revolves on turn cycles is good. Like, that seems a little much. Seems a little much. When Gorg Tome doesn't block, only replaces itself and doesn't pitch, and can literally, in the wrong situation, give your opponent an extra card, if that only draws 1, I don't know. Why can't they just ban specific heroes from playing cards? That's actually a very I thought about that for the Skeleton ban, right? I was like, why did Briar get hit with the Skeleton ban when she can't really do the whole OTK thing? That was when that thought process first crossed my mind. And I think that's a very, very, you know what? All you guys sticking around with me, just chatting, I appreciate it. Like, this is too good. This is too good. You guys are the goats. But that was the first time it, like, you know, kind of crossed my mind, was that interaction. Like, because in 2021 US Nats, when everybody was on Lightning Briar, I ran Channel Mount Heroic Briar into that field, and I was actually running Skeleton just for the armor block, because I was basically just denying embodiments and then sending 4, denying embodiments, sending 4, and then playing Channel Mount Heroic and blowing them out was like my whole strategy into that deck, and it performed fairly well. However, when they banned the skeleton from Viscerai, I was like, well, Briar can't really like leverage it the same way he could. Theoretically, Briar could like stack up a bunch of rune chants and play a Sonata, but like it would not be as good because you don't continually get value as you play your cards out. They did that in Thrones. Basically, need a restricted list. Can't play any 2 cards the same list together. Yep, 3 of Voltaire. Yep. But like, does that? I don't. So Zach, I guess you have a lot of in-depth knowledge about a lot of games across the board. Whereas this is my first TCG, so I don't really. How necessary is the simplicity of the ban/restricted list? Me as a player, I think like new players walking up and they have to read like a list that says this card can't be played with this one, but on Tuesdays it can be played in this deck. You know, like creating like a slew of like nuances seems very abrasive, or like, you know, creating a lot of friction for new players coming into the game. But I don't have anything to compare it to because I've never really played. I mean, I played Yu-Gi-Oh for a little bit, and I know that you have to go to Kinko's to get a copy of it because it comes out in like a ream of paper, 500 pages long, because they have to ban so many cards. But that's the only other like experience that I have. But as far as I know, Yu-Gi-Oh only did like, you can have 0 copies, you can have 1 copy, or you can have 2 copies. So never played a FFG game, I see. Amazing. Also on Channel Mount Roach. Yeah, you played, Zach, you played CMH at 2021? Hell yeah, and Skeleton. So the restricted list was just a big list of cards. Can't play more than 1. Okay, yeah. That makes sense. That's kind of how Yu-Gi-Oh did it. You can only play 1 copy, 2 copies, or 3. And that's also, I don't know if LSS has spoken on this, but have they ever, I want to say I've read something where they made a ban not for balance reasons, but just because they wanted to shake stuff up. If there's anybody in chat, what event was it for? I could have swore they said they made like a ban, and it wasn't particularly for balance reasons, but they just wanted to like shake up the meta a little bit. I don't remember what event or what ban, but God, I think I'm trying to remember. It's eluding me, but not entirely sure. But I wonder if LSS, the point that I was getting at was, I wonder if LSS is open to the idea of banning cards strictly to force a shift in the meta rather than just to say like it's broken, right? Yeah, I think it was around Skeleton. Was it the Autumn's Touch ban? Was the Autumn's Touch ban them saying like, we don't think it's unbalanced, we're just trying to shake stuff up a little bit? I don't remember. I could have swore they said something along those lines on one of their bans, that they just wanted to force. Was it not Worlds where they were like, they wanted to just force a new meta or something? I don't remember. I'm gonna try to stop trying to remember. Um, it might have been the Striders in Icelander and like Ice Vein and stuff like that. It's entirely possible, but I think I recall them saying something along those lines. And I mean, what do you guys think about that? Do you agree with like cards getting banned just because they want to like switch things up, or do you think there needs to be an extremely valid reason? Obviously, if it was to shake things up, it wouldn't be a forever ban; it would just be a suspension, right? But I think it does beg the question of, is that good from you guys? Because we're the ones showing up to events, and if they're doing that, and yeah, the belittle ban was for deck building diversity. Yep, because they started realizing that every deck was, which I still to this day think belittle should have never been in Viscerai. I'll die on that hill, but that's my opinion. Although I think it was Hayden Dale that kind of put that one on the map. Not my favorite Viscerai list I've ever seen, but I do know that like when belittle was, ever since Pablo won the first Pro Tour with the 6 belittle chain utilizing the yellow ones, you basically take care, Zach. Thanks for stopping by. But ever since Pablo utilized the 6th belittle, a lot of decks just started forcing ways to incorporate that card because there was so much value behind it. So that makes perfect sense, But at the same time, like every deck runs E-Strike, just about. Every deck runs CNC, But I guess though CNC is more of a tool against certain decks, so you can't really approach it from the same light, right? Belittle was only a tool against Icelander, really, to secure extra blues for disruption. Other than that, it was just a very efficient attack that acquired resources when resources were not drawn. But I think the LL points does a lot for that. Just need to keep having events to rotate things. That makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Warmonger seems, even if there are some forms of balance. Yeah, Warmonger's just, it's harsh, right? Like if you're playing a deck that's really affected by it, it's rough. It gets rough really quick. But I think it just should have been a red 2 block, or even a red 3 block, probably fine. But blue 3 block, 0 cost, that's just so much. It's got everything. But all right, I think I'm gonna call it here. I really do appreciate everybody showing up. I hope that if you got any value from the fatigue Briar thing, share it to somebody that you know is playing an event. Let them know about it. The whole reason I made today's video was so that way, I heard a lot of people saying that they didn't enjoy playing against it because they didn't understand it, and I was just trying to break that, so that way, everybody's last game against Briar is not miserable. Is kind of like the number one goal. But so hopefully now everybody is ready for it if they run into it for the rest of national season and the 3 battle hardens that we have left. Other than that, I wish everybody the best of luck for any tournaments that they're playing over the next 3 weeks, and I will be back on Wednesday.